Hey everyone, welcome back to the Incredible India podcast series. I'm Sam.
And I'm Taylor.
So imagine stepping outside tonight, right, and just looking up at the stars. Every human instinct, and frankly, thousands of years of historical consensus, tells you that the ground you're standing on is completely, totally still.
Right, yeah, it feels dead still.
Exactly. And the sky just looks like this massive, glittering dome that's rotating over your head. I mean, if you were alive in 499 CE, whether you were in the Roman Empire or like the Chinese dynasties, a stationary Earth was just the absolute unquestionable truth of the universe.
Oh, totally. It wasn't even up for debate.
Right. But today we're dedicating this deep dive to a 23-year-old in ancient India who looked up at that exact same sky and basically realized that the entire human race was completely wrong.
Yeah, we are dissecting the mind of an absolute intellectual giant named Aryabhata. And to do this, we're pulling from a really fascinating stack of historical excerpts and these highly detailed heritage travel logs provided by Five Senses Tours.
Which are so good.
They really are. They've essentially given us like a front row seat to the ancient intellectual traditions of India, specifically focusing on a text Aryabhata wrote called the Aryabhata. He wrote it in Kusumapura, which is modern-day Patna in the state of Bihar.
And the stakes for this deep dive are actually surprisingly modern for you listening, because by the time we wrap this up, you'll understand how the fundamental architecture of our whole digital world, like every time you type a number into a spreadsheet or your phone's GPS pings a satellite, that all relies on a mathematical framework forged in ancient Bihar over 15 centuries ago.
It's wild to think about. And, the Aryabhata itself is just this masterclass in concise brilliance. It's written entirely in Sanskrit verse, and it's only 121 stanzas long.
Wow, just 121. That's nothing.
Literally nothing. But those stanzas contain, like, paradigm-shifting claims.
Yeah.
To really get the gravity of this, you have to look at the global scientific climate at the time. Europe is entering the early post-Roman period, and they are heavily clinging to Ptolemy's geocentric model.
Right, the rigid belief that Earth is the unmoving center of literally everything.
Exactly. But right in the middle of this era, Aryabhata just drops a bombshell. He claims definitively that the Earth rotates on its own axis. So the stars aren't spinning around us, we're the ones spinning.
That is huge.
And he doesn't use, like, mysticism to make this point. He uses this wonderfully elegant, grounded analogy right there in the text. He says, imagine you're a passenger on a boat moving swiftly down a river. When you look at the stationary trees on the riverbank, they actually appear to be moving backward.
Oh, I love that. It's like, let's push a bit deeper into why that analogy is so profound, especially from, a psychological perspective. Think about being on a train today. You're sitting completely still, looking out the window at another train on the track next to you.
Oh, yeah, I know this feeling.
Right. And suddenly that other train pulls away, but for a split second, your brain's vestibular system just fails you. And you are totally gripped by the sensory illusion that your train is the one rolling backward.
Yes. It's so disorienting.
It is. Aryabhata essentially diagnosed the entire night sky as a massive neurological illusion. I mean, can you imagine the pure intellectual courage it took to trust math over what your own two eyes seem to tell you every single night?
Surrendering your own sensory experience to raw mathematics like that requires just a staggering amount of confidence. He lived in a society that almost universally accepted a stationary Earth. So trusting his numbers was this act of profound scientific defiance.
Absolutely. But, a philosophical breakthrough about a spinning Earth isn't enough just on its own. If you claim the Earth is spinning, you eventually have to, prove it by measuring that spin.
Right, you need the receipts.
Exactly. And this is where we have to bridge the gap between what he claimed and how he actually backed it up.
Which means we have to talk about the sidereal day. So a sidereal day is the time it takes for the Earth to complete one full rotation on its axis relative to the fixed background stars. It's just slightly shorter than our standard 24-hour solar day.
And it's like a foundational metric for any serious astronomical model.
Totally foundation.
Well, I actually have the modern data for this right in front of me. Today, using networks of atomic clocks and advanced satellite geodesy, astrophysicists measure the Earth's sidereal rotation at 23 hours, 56 minutes, and 4.091 seconds. So what did Aryabhata calculate back in 499 CE?
Okay, get this. His calculation comes out to 23 hours, 56 minutes, and 4.1 seconds.
Wait, really? That is an error of less than 1/100th of a second.
Yep, less than 0.0009 seconds off.
That honestly borders on science fiction. How is that physically possible without atomic clocks or even a telescope? Like, what was the actual mechanism he was using to capture time at that microscopic resolution?
Well, he was using this incredibly sophisticated array of observational instruments. He basically took the tools of his era and heavily refined them. One primary method involved the Gadi yantra, which was a highly calibrated water clock.
Okay, how does that work?
Imagine this specialized copper bowl with a tiny, precise hole at the bottom, floating in a larger basin of water. The time it took for the bowl to fill and sink was a standard unit of time. But to get to a fraction of a second, he wasn't just watching a bowl sink once.
Right, that wouldn't be nearly accurate enough.
Exactly. He was interpolating data over massive periods of time. He tracked the rising of specific star constellations night after night, year after year, and mathematically averaged out all the minute discrepancies.
Oh, I see. So by measuring these massive cycles, those tiny margins of error just naturally iron themselves out.
Precisely.
That's brilliant. But time is really only one half of the equation here. Because if you're calculating the spin of a massive sphere in space, you're fundamentally dealing with circles, which means you cannot avoid the concept of pi.
Oh, definitely not. And the Aryabhata contains a calculation for pi that stands as one of the most celebrated verses in mathematical history. Translated from Sanskrit, his rule basically states, add 4 to 100, multiply by 8, and then add 62,000. By this rule, the circumference of a circle with a diameter of 20,000 can be approached.
Okay, let's run that arithmetic. So 104 times 8 gives you 832. Adding 62,000 gives you 62,832. And dividing that by the 20,000 diameter results in 3.1416.
Yep. Pi correct to 4 decimal places.
That is just wild. But the mechanism behind getting that number is what really fascinates me, because he didn't have calculus.
No, he didn't. He likely used a geometric technique known as polygon exhaustion.
Polygon exhaustion.
Yeah, so you take a circle and you draw a polygon inside of it, say a hexagon. Now you can easily calculate the perimeter of a hexagon. Then you double the sides to a 12-sided polygon, then 24, then 48, 96, and so on.
Right, and with every doubling, the straight edges of the polygon hug the curved edge of the circle tighter and tighter. Exactly. If you calculate this out to a polygon with 384 sides, you hit Aryabhata's ratio of 3.1416. It is a wildly labor-intensive geometric proof.
I can't even imagine doing that by hand. And doing that math highlights the most brilliant part of the verse, which isn't actually the number itself. It's the specific Sanskrit word he deliberately places at the end of the rule, which is asana.
Right, and asana translates to approaching or approximating.
Yeah, he explicitly refused to say this equals pi. By stating the value can only be approached, he is acknowledging that pi is this fundamental mathematical anomaly. He's recognizing it as an irrational number, a number whose decimal goes on infinitely without ever settling into a repeating pattern.
Which is huge. No finite geometric calculation, not even a polygon with 1,000,000 sides, can ever capture its exact final value.
Exactly, and the philosophical weight of that realization, it cannot be overstated. From what I understand, European mathematicians didn't formally agree that pi was an irrational number until Johann Lambert proved it in the 18th century.
Yeah, 1761 to be exact. Aryabhata embedded the concept into his verse more than 12 centuries earlier. He fully understood the philosophical and mathematical limits of his own tools, which is just a massive intellectual flex.
It really is. But let's look at the tools themselves for a second, because you cannot calculate the perimeter of a 384-sided polygon down to 4 decimal places using Roman numeral.
Oh God, no, that would be a nightmare.
Right. You can't carry a remainder of a 10,000th across a massive geometric proof without a fiercely robust number system, which forces us to address one of the most Googled, heavily debated topics surrounding ancient Indian mathematics, which is, did he invent zero?
Yeah, that is a critical nuance to untangle. A lot of popular history broadly attributes the absolute invention of zero to Aryabhata, but the reality is more complex, and we have to be precise here. Aryabhata did not invent zero as a fully operational standalone number with, defined arithmetic properties.
Okay, so who did?
That specific breakthrough, actually writing down the formal rules for how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide by zero, that was achieved by another legendary Indian mathematician named Brahmagupta about 130 years later, around 628 CE.
Okay, so if Brahmagupta wrote the rule book for the arithmetic zero, what exactly was Aryabhata's role in it? Was he just, leaving a blank space on a chalkboard?
Well, the concept of a placeholder, a way to denote an empty position in a column of tens or hundreds, had been slowly germinating in ancient Indian mathematics.
Yeah.
What Aryabhata did was formalize and weaponize the place value number system.
Weaponize it how?
He constructed a framework that was so scientifically rigorous that it could handle the colossal numbers required for deep space astronomy, while also managing the microscopic fractions needed for calculating sidereal days.
Okay, I think I get it. Think of it in terms of engineering a supercar, right? Aryabhata designed the most flawless, high-performance engine block the world had ever seen. He built the complex internal architecture of the place value system that allows numbers to scale infinitely up or down.
Yeah.
But he didn't invent the wheels.
The wheels being zero as a distinct standalone numerical entity.
Exactly. He built the engine with such undeniable power that it essentially demanded the next generation of engineers to finish the vehicle. So people like Brahmagupta could look at his framework and realize, to push this engine to its limit, we need to formalize this empty space into an actual number. We need the wheels to make the vehicle move.
That is a perfect analogy, and that intellectual lineage is incredibly direct. Because Aryabhata demonstrated the sheer computational supremacy of the place value system, it triggered a rapid acceleration in Indian mathematics. By 629 CE, which is literally a year after Brahmagupta defined the rules of zero, a mathematician named Bhaskara became the first person in recorded history to write numbers in the Hindu-Arabic decimal system using a small circle to physically represent zero.
Wow. So Aryabhata basically built the runway that allowed that physical circle to finally take flight.
He absolutely did.
So we have this powerhouse mathematical engine running in the 5th century. But, the ultimate test of any scientific model isn't just describing what is happening right now. It's accurately predicting the future.
Right, making predictions.
And nothing tests the validity of an astronomical framework quite like a total eclipse.
Oh, eclipses were a massive cultural and scientific battleground back then. For the general public in 499 CE, a solar eclipse was a terrifying omen. The dominant popular mythology stated that a demon named Rahu, who had been decapitated, was flying through the cosmos seeking revenge.
As you do.
Right, and a solar eclipse was supposedly Rahu's severed head temporarily swallowing the sun, which would then eventually fall out of his open throat.
It is a phenomenal piece of folklore, but it's important to remember that Aryabhata wasn't just fighting popular myths. He was also actively debating other highly educated scholars in his own era. There were earlier Indian mathematical traditions, like the stanzas, which were incredibly complex, but still fundamentally anchored to those geocentric models.
Yeah, Aryabhata had to prove his model was superior to both the demon myth and the flawed academic consensus. So he stripped away the mythology entirely and replaced it with cold, rigorous celestial geometry. He correctly identified that solar and lunar eclipses are really just shadows. It's the moon moving between the Earth and the sun, or the Earth's shadow falling across the moon.
And predicting those shadows requires a brutal amount of math.
So much math.
You need to calculate the precise orbital paths, the varying speeds of the Earth and the Moon, the angular diameter of the shadows. He utilized early forms of trigonometry to calculate parallax. Yeah?
Exactly. The way the position of the sun and moon appear to shift depending on where you're standing on the Earth's surface. Which brings us to one of the most stunning showdowns in the history of science. Because the ultimate undeniable proof of Aryabhata's mathematical engine didn't happen in his own lifetime. It actually occurred 1,266 years later, creating this crazy clash of scientific eras.
Yes. The setting for this is 1765 in Pondicherry, which was a French colonial settlement on the southeastern coast of India. The European Enlightenment is in full swing, and Europe generally views itself as the absolute pinnacle of scientific progress. And a prominent French astronomer named Guillaume Legentil is visiting the colony.
Right, and Legentil arrives armed with the absolute cutting edge of European astronomy. He brings eclipse charts formulated by Tobias Mayer, who was widely considered one of the finest observational astronomers in Europe at the time. So a lunar eclipse occurs on August 30th, 1765, and both the French scientists and the local Indian astronomers observe it to see whose charts are actually more accurate.
Okay, let's look at the results. Tobias Mayer's state-of-the-art European charts miscalculated the duration of the eclipse by 68 seconds. What about the local Indian computations?
Well, the local astronomers were using computational tables that traced their methodology in an unbroken direct lineage back to Aryabhata's framework from 499 CE. Their calculations were off by only 41 seconds.
That is just incredible. A mathematical framework engineered by a 23-year-old using water clocks and shadow sticks beat the finest minds of the European Enlightenment more than a millennium later.
It really demands a total reassessment of the global history of science.
It totally does, which raises a crucial pushback question for you and anyone listening who grew up learning a traditional Western-centric version of history. We are taught that the European Renaissance was the great awakening of human intellect. But given that Aryabhata had all this right, heliocentric adjacent planetary motion, the geometry of eclipses, pi, Earth's rotation, literally more than 1,000 years before Copernicus or Galileo, why does Western-centric history treat the Renaissance as a discovery of these concepts rather than a rediscovery?
It's a great question, and the transmission of this knowledge is a fascinating historical journey, because knowledge rarely stays locked in one geographical location. By the late 8th century, the Aryabhata and other related Indian mathematical texts were actually translated into Arabic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they became foundational pillars of study during the Islamic Golden Age at the legendary House of Wisdom in Baghdad. And from the Islamic world, the Hindu-Arabic numeral system and all the advanced astronomy built upon it slowly filtered into Europe over several centuries.
So, by the time the Renaissance sparks, the foundational DNA of Indian mathematics was already circulating within the European scientific bloodstream.
Exactly. History is frequently curated by those in power, and the origin points of complex ideas often get flattened out or just entirely erased in later textbooks. But the ideas themselves survive. And what makes this deep dive so compelling is that this vast intellectual heritage isn't just an abstract concept floating in a textbook. It's rooted in physical geography that you can still experience today.
Yes, the city of Kusumapura, where Aryabhata observed the stars, is modern-day Patna. You can walk through the Kumarhar archaeological site and stand among the excavated ruins of the ancient Mauryan Empire. But to truly understand the intellectual climate that produced a mind like his, we have to talk about Nalanda University.
Oh, no, Nalanda. It was situated just southeast of Patna, and it was a sprawling ancient mega campus. Founded in the 5th century, it's literally considered one of the first great residential universities in recorded history. At its absolute peak, Nalanda housed over 10,000 students and 2,000 professors who traveled from across Asia, from Korea, Japan, China, Tibet, Indonesia, just to study there.
A university of 10,000 scholars functioning 1,500 years ago. The scale is almost hard to process. It wasn't just a quiet monastery, it was a roaring hub of debate. They had a library complex known as the Dharma Ganja, which translated to the Treasury of Truth. Historical accounts describe it as this massive complex of multi-story buildings housing hundreds of thousands of manuscripts.
Yeah, the scale is unbelievable.
This is the academic ecosystem Aryabhata was swimming in. He wasn't just some lone genius working in a vacuum. He was the product of a culture that heavily subsidized and revered the pursuit of complex knowledge.
And Nalanda thrived for centuries before it was tragically destroyed and burned in 1193 CE. But the sheer density of intellectual horsepower that existed in ancient Bihar reshaped the trajectory of human progress.
It totally reorients how we view the timeline of innovation. We have this habit of looking back at ancient civilizations and viewing them as quaint or primitive. But think about the device you're using right now. The entire digital age, every line of code, the algorithms powering artificial intelligence, every GPS satellite maintaining global communications, it is all fundamentally built upon a numbering system that was formalized by a young man looking up at the night sky in Bihar 1,500 years ago.
It's mind-blowing when you put it like that.
It forces you to pause and wonder, what foundational truths of our modern science today will seem incredibly primitive to observers looking back at us 1,500 years from now?
If you decide to travel to India, we have a recommendation. 5 Senses Tours organizes tours across India which are immersive cultural experiences. You can email contact@fivesensestours.com. Note 5 is written as a numeral in contact at fivesensestours.com or WhatsApp to +919 845 677 446.